So most people in our Speech 111 class have a car. It's pretty mandatory for a college student to have. And as we all know, the braking system is the most important part of its safety features. I mean, there's seat belts and all that, but the brakes are what are going to stop you. I have personally changed brakes probably 3 or 4 times in my life, so I have a little bit of practice, not the most. I've gotten most of my knowledge from my dad, who is helping me in this, to change them, to learn about them, to know what exactly they do. I believe that everyone should have the ability to either change their brakes or know how their braking systems work. So I'm going to be showing how to uninstall your brakes, how to reinstall the brake pads, and I'm going to explain just the differences between semi-metallic and ceramic brakes themselves. My primary sources in this are going to be, what's this title? The difference between organic, ceramic, and semi-metallic brake pads, which is by Andy Jensen. It was created on July 19th of 2017, and the reason I see this as a credible source is because it was on Advanced Auto Parts website, which are pretty big people in the auto parts world. My other primary source is going to be ceramic brake pads versus semi-metallic. What are the differences? Which was created on January 20th of 2012, and that was on Sequence Performance Brakes website. The author's name was Admin, so it just didn't really have an author's name. So yeah, now we're going to show how to start the process of uninstalling your brakes. So first thing you do is you're going to want to set your e-brake. This is my car, and it's an 05 Ford Escape. You want to make sure your e-brake is on before anything else. Then you're going to come around, find a support beam on the bottom, and put the jack on that. You're going to crank it up, and then put the jack stand underneath another support, which we currently have here. After that's done, you're going to come over and you're going to take the tire itself off. As you see here, you're going to want to take it off just a regular pattern. After you get that off, you're going to see the caliper and your rotor, along with your brake pads. There are 2 bolts on the back, which you can see he's loosening now, so we can get the caliper off. I personally have metallic brake pads, which are very similar to semi-metallic. The only real difference is their name, not their composite or anything. After you get the rotor off, you'll see both your brake pads right there. One is attached to a piston, the other is attached to just a solid piece. So what he's doing now is he's taking the one that's attached to the solid side off. And he's going to show how to get the one attached to the piston off, which you can now see fairly clearly. And now you can see the piston in there. So what he's going to do now is he's going to compress the piston with a C-clamp. This will force the brake fluid back into the master cylinder, which you can see right there. This makes it much easier to reinstall new brakes and get the rotor back on. So now he's putting the brake pads back on. First he's starting with the piston. The metal pieces sometimes can be a little bit annoying. There it goes. Cinch into place and it fits right into its slots. On to the other side. Now he's putting the piece back on the solid side. Sometimes they just don't want to fit back into their slot, so you gotta just work with them. There it goes. There. You can hear it snap in. If you look, you can see both of them are parallel to each other, ready to slide back on the caliper, as he's doing. Sometimes they can get stuck at a slight angle, which makes it to where they don't want to slide back on easily. So you got to check that. There it goes, slid right back on. Then you just line up the holes for the bolts, put them back in, tighten them down, both top and bottom. It's hard to show the bottom in this video, so just believe me, there's one on the top, one on the bottom holding the caliper in place. Tighten those down. All good. Next step, you just put the tire back on. You want to hand tighten the lug nuts on the outside in a star pattern. And then when you go to fully tighten them on, you want to do the same thing in that star pattern to make sure everything goes on nice and even and your tire's still balanced. You see it's nice and tight now. Next thing you want to do, make sure your brake fluid is still topped off. All good. You see the max line on the side. I'm not sure how well you can see it in this video, but it's about at the cusp of the round on the side of the container. Then what you're going to want to do, make sure everything's good, jack it back up to where you're off of the jack stand. Pull the jack stand out, and then let the jack back down. Then you have just changed both brakes on your car. Now I'm going to hand the camera back to my dad. I'm going to shortly explain the differences between semi-metallic and ceramic brakes. So semi-metallics actually were created to replace organic brakes, which were the originals. They came out back in the 60s. They have a very firm feel on the pedal, along with for more heavy-duty cars, more like trucks and SUVs and stuff like that. The downsides to them are they do have a break-in period, and they're noisy, they create a lot of brake dust, and they don't last the longest, while they wear on your rotors a lot faster. But they can work in a lot wider of a climate range. Then there's ceramic brakes, which they're not the ceramics that you would think are like China sets or anything like that. It's the same ceramic they use on the space shuttle for heat sinks, actually. So it's fairly heavy-duty stuff. But because of that, it is a lot more expensive, which is one of the main downsides to it. The other downside is it can be a little noisy in the cold, which isn't a huge thing, but something to remember. Along with some positives are they're a lot more long-lasting, they don't create very much brake dust, and the brake dust they do create don't stick to the tires, which is very nice, along with they most of the time are very quiet. And they came out back in the 80s. So now that we have both uninstalled and reinstalled the brake pads, I've shown you the master cylinder, how to that you need to put the e-brake on, and how to both take off your brakes and put them back on. You should be able to take care of your car a lot better now, or at least have a better understanding of what your car does, how it works, and all the good stuff like that. It's very important that everyone knows how to do this. It's not a very difficult thing to do, not for most people at least. So I've shown you all this stuff because I think it's very important. I think safety is very important to everybody. So everyone get out there and have fun driving with your brakes.